In transformation, when 2% of a population begin to think in more liberated and spiritually open ways, a new level of consciousness will awaken, bringing about a new reality for the total population. Join me, Jael McLean, confidence coach, business owner, musician, health and fitness enthusiast, transformational instigator, and your host of the 2% podcast in creating a new reality of spiritual awareness, confidence, and authenticity. Hello and welcome to the 2% Podcast Season 2, your source for empowerment, expansion, and elevation. I am so excited today because we're joined by one of my newest mentors in the work of transformation, PhD in counseling psychology, transformational trainer for nearly 5 decades and master trainer, board member of the Transformational Leadership Council, TLC, and corporate wellness and personal performance coach, Dr. Ray Blanchard.
Well, hello. I'm glad to be here. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. You and I have had some really great conversations, and I know you've been working with some of my really close friends and colleagues. So I've been really excited to have this conversation with you and with the audience that we've got. Sounds like you got a fabulous audience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ray. And yes, that is true. Thank you so much again to the 2%ers and all the audience and the viewers. So I actually got to meet you earlier, actually pretty early in the year. I was able to connect with you. I had been working with Betty Sproul, who is also a very longtime colleague of yours, master trainer as well. Heard your name and reached out to you, and here we are.
Yes, my great friend Betty Sproul, as your audience knows, she's been a great friend for almost 5 decades, very close to that. And I don't want to date her or date myself, but for quite a long time. We started our careers off about the same time, and we've gotten to know each other. We're sisters and brothers in the work, but we're also sisters and brothers in life. And we've done some pretty amazing things together and traveled the world together. So we spend a lot of time conversing about the issues of the world and what's going on in the world and how does that affect us and how can we affect and impact the world based on how we see things stacking up. So Betty Sproul is a great friend of mine, and I know you've done a lot of work with her. So you and I and Betty are really dancing to the same tune, I think.
Yeah. Dr. Ray, on the 2% podcast, you know that I explore what are we experiencing out in the world and how can we create an impact. And my first question for you is, what is the human condition occurring in the world that's causing so much violence that we're currently experiencing?
Great question. When I think of the world and what's really going on in the world, it's very dynamic and evolving. And I think our greatness is probably emerging out of this chaos that I think we're experiencing. I think what's really going on in the world right now is I would call it a desperate search for meaning. And I don't know that everybody thinks about it quite like that, but I think that's what's really going on. There's been a lot of work done around people who have done bad things in the world, like so the shooters. I was doing some work in Florida in Broward County with the Parkland, after the Parkland shooting. And I have been doing some work with school systems in Los Angeles and a few other systems. And the question always keeps coming up. How can we stop the violence? How can we stop the shooting? How can we create a world that has more emotional intelligence to it, such that we get along and create more peace in the world? And after thinking about that a lot and working with people, and I also did some research on the people who have done things like jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived, the
Mhm.
survivors. And the question is always put to them, why did you do that? Or what's going on that you would do the things you do? And all of these people seems to be the same common denominators. Three things. One is that there's a loss of identity. People have lost track of who they authentically are in our language. And number two is a break in belonging. People have a loss of connection with other people. For instance, a lot of the kids that were doing some of the shootings, many of them were bullied, and
Mhm.
they have a loss of connection with friends, significant others, even family members. And third is loss of community. They don't seem to have a sense of belonging to something larger than themselves. And I think I would like to emphasize that a lot more because dedicating your life to something larger than yourself, or seeing the world larger than just your personal self, seems to have a lot to do with people being at peace with themselves and fulfilling their own potential. So I
Yeah.
think when you think of those things, loss of identity, a break in belonging, and loss of connection with community, it leaves people in a sense of loss, being lost. And when people are lost, they end up doing crazy things. And so the world that we're seeing right now is a reflection of that. And, to go a little bit another angle on this, in the work that you and I have done, we call it personal development work. To some degree, personal development at the extreme becomes about me, me, me,
Mhm.
which means that we've lost we, we, we.
We.
And that comes back to loss of community and seeing yourself as and identifying yourself as larger than just your me, me, me. So when you look at the world today, you'll see a lot of extremists about me, whether it's them individually or as a tribe, me, my tribe, my tribe, my tribe. And
Mhm.
concession and collaboration doesn't exist because every group or every person wants what they want for themselves. So I think actually, and I'll throw this out as a possible future thing, is rather than doing extreme personal development work, we might want to go towards impersonal development work, whereas people engage in the impersonal life rather than being so focused on the personal life. And in the impersonal life, it's a wider throw, it's a wider world. It's about universal laws and principles and
Mhm.
seeing yourself as part of a whole and a oneness. So I think the world is in disarray in terms of finding their own identity. A lot of the research I did in my dissertation work was about finding a new philosophy, a new concept of psychotherapy. And after so much research with Western thought and Eastern thought and hermeneutics, I came down to the realization that it was fundamentally people's search for meaning, as Viktor Frankl used to talk about.
Mhm.
Search for meaning. And I think people are looking for meaning in life and looking for significance. Whereas we've been so focused on people's success, I think we need to focus on people's significance.
That's a massive distinction in how different we all may measure success anyway.
Yeah, because I think success is really great. In this search for success, sometimes people lose their sense of significance, a sense of that they matter. because success to some people reflects their interpretation of themselves as unsuccessful. So your real thought about yourself, your real sense of self is I'm unsuccessful and I'm seeking success. What if we could have people learn about your significance? Uh, Look at your significance and how you matter and how much you matter, and the meaning of your life and the meaning of life and your place in it, and use that as your jumping off point. Use that as your leverage to make a difference and be success, and let success follow that, rather than approaching success from I'm not it, I'm empty, I'm not successful, I'm not. What if you were filled with significance and ready to make a difference in the larger world, larger than just your me? And I think that would shift the paradigm tremendously.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see where that being the launching point where I'm significant, I matter, I have something to offer, I'm brilliant, I'm unique. What I have to offer, no one else has. And that be
Yeah.
the launch pad or the launch point.
Think of what would be possible in our school systems, for instance, if our youth really got it that they mattered and they had something to offer, rather than having to go to school wondering if they matter and that they don't matter, and being separate from themselves and separate from other people. What if they could be uh, in oriented towards their significance, their uniqueness, as you say, and that they matter, that they're a unique being, and that they have something to contribute, and that the world is waiting for their contribution.
Game changer.
Game changer. At least it would shift the way we approach educating
Yeah.
kids and educating ourselves.
You refer to yourself as going from a farm boy in the deep south to becoming a transformational astronaut. Tell us about that.
Well, I thought that was kind of cool to say, actually. But yes, I was a farm boy. I grew up on the farm, and I learned a lot being a farmer. And it really has shaped a lot of my thinking to some degree, in that living on the farm, it's commonplace to work with your neighbors. It's commonplace to grow up in a community, a small community, where everybody helped everybody else out. And living on a farm, you really begin to realize that you're not in the world alone. That your crops, your production, your harvest really depends on your ecological relationship. So I guess I learned a lot about we're ecological beings, not just singular, isolated beings. That we're in relationship, we're related, and and identifying myself as being related and connected
Mm.
with the environment and the human environment as well. So I learned a lot about that. But I grew up on a farm, but through school and through opportunities and development led me into the work of psychology and the work of how to have people approach their peak potential, and how to have people uh, manifest who they authentically are in the world. So in that pursuit, it led me to looking into who are we, not externally, but who are we internally? How do we identify ourselves? So I spent a lot of the last few decades in the world, the inner world of being. And I would say in the inner constellations, the inner galaxies, the inner world of where we live. So I'm now more like a transformational astronaut. So I travel in space, in the inner space. And that's why I thought about that, is that that's really what astronauts do in outer space. What we're doing, you and I are doing, we're traveling in the inner space. So we're astronauts too, in a way, And we're in this grand discovery and exploration of who we authentically are. And that's what I'm doing now. And I think the growing up as a farm boy, learning about ecology and relatedness, now in the world of psychotherapy, philosophy, transformation, I'm now looking at the relatedness uh, from an inner perspective, finding the inner genius, exploring who we authentically are from the inside out. And as you know, transformation is an inside out game. It's not an
Yeah.
outside in game where more traditional thinking is.
Can I share a dream that I had with you?
Oh, yeah.
So I had a dream that it's like these beings were needing to send me from this reality to another one. And all of a sudden, I wasn't in my body. And I was simply like this formless energy, but I was still like me, but I was also formless energy. And they actually put me in like a filing cabinet. Like they needed to box me up so that I could be shipped from here to there and I could travel across space. What was profound was experiencing myself like I'm not this body.
Mm.
And I was still the essence of myself, and nor was I like confined to the space that this body takes up. And so they
Wow.
needed to like package me and put me in a form so that I don't disperse all over the place.
Right, right.
So I
Hey, you
think
give you some
of,
boundaries.
yes, I think of, the episode with Betty where she was in the question of, if I wasn't black or white or this religion or that religion or all these things that we identify ourselves as, or a
Mm.
female or blonde, who would I be then?
Yeah.
And so, as silly as that dream may sound, I experienced myself as being no thing.
Yes. Well, it brings us into this whole conversation of, are we our body? Are we our mind? Are we our emotions? Are we our spirit? We used to do this process in the training, and I do it sometimes now. This is more of a closed eye process. And I take people through a centering process. Close your eyes and get centered. Feel your feet, feel your uh, uh, ankles, feel your legs, all the way up your body, your knees, your thighs, and just get in touch with them, and just be present to each part, and pay attention to the sensations of each part of your body, all the way up your torso and your back and your chest, and your breathing, and feeling your lungs expanding and contracting, and feeling your upper shoulders and relaxing them, and your hands and arms and your neck and your head. And after a while, after you go through the whole body, you tell people to, and just be present to what you're experiencing. And if you notice all the sensations of your body, you know that you have a body, but you're not your body, because you can notice the sensations. You have your emotions, but you're not your emotions, because you can observe them. You have a mind, but you're not your mind, because you can even observe your mind working. So
Mm-hmm.
who are we? We must be that can observe it all. And that can observe it all may not be contained or containerized. It might be an expanse that all the rest of it fits into.
Mm.
So we might be that expanse of being. And I tend to think that we are that expanse of being. And the thing that I noticed throughout my own life experiences is that when I experience myself as that expanse of being, the overmind, that can notice, I tend to, after a while, have this incredible experience of love, kind of a
Mm.
not personal love, kind of more of a impersonal love, in which I've defined that as the divine, love divine. And I say that maybe we're that, and we're not necessarily uh, the name Jael, or the name Ray. We have that, but that's not who we are. We
Yeah.
have thoughts, feelings, but that's not who we are. So who are we? I say we are beyond all of those distinctions at the larger level, and we have personal vista points like a mind or body, so that we can function in the world in which we witness and observe ourselves. But we are not limited to that. We're
Mhm.
bigger than that, beyond that. And I also say that we're beyond that in terms of how people define themselves. When people tend to define themselves as only my body, only my circumstances, only the things that are going on around me, uh, those people tend to have a less of a sense of hope and purpose
Mm.
and meaning.
Yeah.
Yes, we are circumstantial. Yes, we have these physiological descriptions and distinctions. But if that's all that there is, a lot of people wonder, then what's the point? Is that all that there is for me just simply to survive my circumstances? Well, I don't want to talk people out of believing it that way, but what I'm noticing and what we've noticed a lot is that when people do define themselves that way, they have a lesser quotient of purpose, a lesser sense of purpose. And people who tend to think of themselves as larger than their circumstances, larger than their physiology, uh, an expansive being, they seem to have a greater sense of purpose, greater sense of hope, and a greater sense of connectedness to something larger than themselves. And it gives them a greater sense of meaning.
And does that bring us back to that sense of significance?
Yeah, we'll circle back to that. Yeah, a sense of significance in that, what is my purpose in relationship to this larger being, larger self? And when we do transformational training, I've been talking to some trainers recently, and we were talking about how do we as trainers work with people, we call it processing people, through their narrative, through their story, all the way down to their belief systems and their interpretations, and getting to the root causes of how they constitute their lives and why their results or outcomes are as they are, because of the belief systems and the narratives that you're living out of. And I was talking to the trainers, and they said, so when you get people to that level, they can see that. Now what? And the other trainer was saying, well, then you can tell them to write a new narrative or constitute a new narrative. And I said, that sounds good. But if most people were able to simply write a new narrative, they would already. So I think that once you get people down to that level of the genesis of their belief systems, of their narratives, in order for them to write a new narrative, I think there's a gap, a gulf between what's the narrative I'm living in and writing a new narrative. I think there's a gap, and you got to cross that bridge. And to cross that bridge, I think people have to realize that even though I've created the life I've created, good or bad, even though I've done that, and even though I see my beliefs, even though I see my narrative and my interpretation, I am still loved in spite of it all. I am still cared for unconditionally. And when people can really experience that I am loved, I am unconditionally cared for, in spite of my story, in spite of my beliefs, in spite of what I've done, I now have a new chance, a new opportunity, a new possibility. That's when I think people can write a new narrative. And then they're writing a new narrative inside of the context that I am divinely loved. And that's when I think people can write a new narrative that can be more fulfilling in their lives, rather than just trying to replace one narrative with another narrative and still living out of the same conversation. I think living in a new conversation of I am loved unconditionally and can write a new narrative out of that.
And would that be like a worthiness?
A
Or is
worthiness.
this like standalone by itself?
I think it's like worthiness. I think it's I am part of something greater. I am heir to the divine. I am unconditionally loved and connected, which makes me worthy. If I am worthy to the divine, then what greater worth could one have? Then, given that worth,
Yeah.
I can construct my life out of that realization. And I think it's probably far more fulfilling for people, because I don't think people can just get to the bottom line of my beliefs and then switch gears and now I think I'll just write a new narrative.
Yeah.
I think that's possible once people realize that even though I've done what I've done, I am still loved. I am loved unconditionally, and I am held in an unconditional space. Out of that way of thinking, out of that listening, I think people can feel worthy and more fulfilled, and they're not just doing their life to fill up an emptiness. They're living their life from a fullness. They're designing their life out of a fullness.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really hear you when you say it's something greater than simply replacing one narrative with another narrative, and that could be a belief, a story, and it could be something great. It could be also like I've created great things in my life. I've had a, I've had a couple of uh, I've had a couple of crazy times as well that I've generated that didn't feel good and were painful, or and so it's like you're not necessarily referring to things I've done wrong in my life. It could also simply be a new baseline, like I've done great things in my life, and I still see an opportunity to create a new narrative for myself and be in that worthiness or that unconditional love to generate something even greater.
Absolutely. You and I've talked a lot about language, that uh, language creates, and language being the house of being. When you think about creating a new narrative, if you're already operating from the belief system of not enough, not worthy, uh, and striving to succeed because you're not successful, and so you want to become successful because you're not, living out of that interpretation or that conversation, so to speak, and trying to create a new success out of that conversation, you can only create more of what's consistent with that conversation.
Yeah.
And no matter how hard you try, you're still going to create in that conversation. Okay. So, in order to shift and create out of another conversation, I say you got to cross over into that I am loved rather than not loved. I am
Yeah.
fulfilled rather than I'm not fulfilled. I am, I am. And I say creating out of that conversation holds a whole new world of possibilities. And we've talked about language. In other words, we all live in a worldview, a perspective. And it's more than just a perspective. It goes to the root of our very being. We live in a state of being a worldview. And a worldview of emptiness, a worldview of not enough, creates more of the same. And a worldview of enough creates more of its same. Everything creates its own self. Like an apple seed creates apple, orange seed creates oranges, pear seeds creates pears. I'm not enough seed creates I'm not enough. I am enough seeds create enough. So we live in a conversation, so to speak. The not enough conversation is one of them, and to live in that and to act out of that just constitutes more of the same until you can get to a new place. I think you got to go to the place of neutrality first, the place of non-attachment. And once you get to that place, like down to your belief system and non-attachment, I just am. And when you can then begin to experience, as I said, the unconditional love, that's a new conversation to live out of. And whatever you do inside of that conversation will create more of the same of that.
Yeah. And then can we bring now listening into this as well? Because in one of our conversations, you said, I'm speaking myself into being from my listening.
Okay. Well, this is a great, juicy conversation. I love this conversation. And you and I can go miles in this conversation. But I think for the audience to hear this in a way that's workable for them, let's break it down to simple examples, simple metaphors or examples. If there are 100 people in a room and I made a statement to that audience, almost everyone would hear it differently, right? The actual hearing, physical hearing, they're all hearing the same statement. But what they do with their hearing is the key. So we hear the same thing physiologically, but we listen differently. We listen to a different music. We listen to a different interpretation. So we listen the world differently, even though we're hearing the same thing. So the listening, the way in which we listen, what we listen to, and what we listen for is unique to each of us. So your listening might be completely different than my listening or someone in the audience listening. If I said, oh, I like the suit you got on, or I don't like the suit you got on, somebody might say, oh, he doesn't like me, because that's their listening. Somebody might listen it as, oh, he cares about me, so he's being honest with me. So we listen to the world differently. And based on where we listen and how we listen the world, that shapes how we show up in the world. That shapes the way we present ourselves or present ourselves in the world. And the way we present ourselves in the world, I call that your speaking. You're speaking yourself into the world out of the way in which you listen. So your listening dictates how you show up and how you speak into the world. Now let's talk about speaking a little bit and talking. Uh, you probably have heard people say the expression, smile in your face and piss on your boots. Being in North Carolina, that's one of the phrases I learned out
Yeah.
there. In other words, you've heard people say, I love you, but at the same time be giving you the finger, right?
Yeah.
Now, they don't have to say the actual words giving you the finger, but you can pick it up just like that. So they might be talking, I love you, but the energetic force and the energy is screw you, or I don't like you, or I don't care to be with you. They don't have to verbalize that, but it is presenced nevertheless. So I call that your speaking. You're speaking
Mm.
even when you're not talking. The
Yeah.
question is, do we even know what we're speaking? Because the world interacts with our speaking more than it interacts with our talking. That's why we can say talk is cheap, because talk is just words, but the speaking is the beingness, the energetic vibrational beingness that's showing up in the world from our listening. So in a sense, we could say we live in a conversation, and there are two kinds of conversations. One conversation is two kinds of language. One language is a language of doing. That's talking, words coming out of my mouth, and hearing, stuff that comes in my physical ear. That's a doing language, hearing and talking. But then there's also the language of being. That's that listening I was talking about, you come from, and the speaking, the energetic being. So we're linguistic beings. We're a listening and a speaking, and that's far more powerful than your hearing and your talking. So in a way, you're saying we are a listening and we're a speaking, and we're speaking ourselves into the world out of our listening.
If you would guide me on this, if I'm listening something like jealousy, or I'm listening, hatred, or something of that nature, am I hearing that because I'm being that and I'm hearing it that way?
Um, you you might be hearing, um, "Oh, you're wonderful, you're beautiful, you're this, you're all that." You're hearing that from people, and you could even verbalize that out to yourself. But it might possibly be that you don't buy that at some level, or you're got a different interpretation of that at a deeper level. So even though you might hear the words, it doesn't register for you. It's just words, because what shows up underneath that is maybe I'm not enough, and therefore I'm jealous of friends of mine with other people because that means I'm not enough. Now nobody ever told you you weren't enough, but it might be where you're operating from. Your listening is that, and so you'll look to any evidence that tells you that you're not enough. And so out of that, you would then presence yourself in such a way that people tend to match up to that vibrational level. Like there are people who are listening things like, uh, I'm unworthy, listening things like in relationships, I'm a doormat, so I don't matter. Treat me any way you want to. And sure enough, they attract people to step all over them because they're operating out of that listening. The question I think people need to focus on is, what is my listening? Do I even know what my listening is? Am I listening poverty? Am I listening uh, being abused? Am I listening being used? Am I listening success? What is my listening? And if you notice some of the things that come out of your mouth, statements you make, things that you say, uh, then use that like as a clue. Start to start thinking about, okay, now where was I coming from to think that? Where was I coming from to say that? Where was I coming from to react like that? So if you can start to backtrack, where does that come from? Where am I coming from? What is that all about? Where is that coming from in me? If you could track it all the way back, you might begin to track it all the way back to your authentic listening. Oh, I'm listening that I'm not good enough. I'm not this or this. You might find you're listening, a deeper kind of listening. And once you can start to notice your listening, just notice it without judgment. That gives you an opportunity to shift. That's where transformation actually is taking place. It's when you can listen to your listening, when you can notice your own listening. At the deepest level, the awareness of that allows you to make choices. If you're not aware of it, you just keep running on the same track. It's ongoing. But being aware of it allows you to interrupt it and allows you to open a new possibility. And I think that the trick for people is to be able to listen your own listening, to notice your own listening, because that allows you to shift. That allows you to come to resolution, and it allows new possibility.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much.
Wow.
There's another conversation that I've been wanting to dive into with you around law of attraction. And law of attraction for me, like, it's so popular,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like it falls flat for me because I experience it as, if I think about something enough, or if I want it enough, or if I put it on a vision board and look at it every day, it's like if I hope and pray and wish for it enough and think about it or obsess about it, then I'm going to get it and it's going to come to me. And that could be my interpretation. That's how I've experienced it presented. Like, if I think about it enough, it'll come to me, and I'll manifest it. And so I wanted to ask you about law of attraction, and can you fill in some of these gaps for me in this theory?
Well, let's take a cut at it. You probably uh, seen the movie video The Secret,
Mm-hmm.
and many of the people in the audience may have seen it. It has some really great points, and it was filmed at one of our Transformational Leadership Council meetings. And so it has a relationship to TLC. And many of the people in The Secret will also say that uh, although it's got some really great points, it leaves something to be desired, something missing as well.
Okay.
Uh, because I think most people have heard it as, if you can think it, see it, believe it, you receive it. Or something along those lines. If that was the case, most people would be receiving everything that they think, see, imagine, uh, believe, and then they would be receiving it. It's not quite that simplistic. And that might disappoint a few listeners because I think a lot of people hope that it is that simple or want it to be that simple and would buy into that simplistic kind of view of it and run along in life thinking that they're going to receive anything that they can think and see and believe. Well, yes, some of that's true, but I think it's a little bit more than that. And it really goes back to what I was talking with you about earlier about speaking and listening. Um, and I think the law of attraction really at the deeper level is language based, is linguistic. It really is about your listening and your speaking, because your speaking is vibrational. It's an energetic force of how you presence yourself on a energetic level and how you vibrate. So it really, law of attraction has to take in more of the universal laws, like law of vibration and law of causality. So think of it like we're in our speaking, we're vibrating, and we're always vibrating. And we're putting, and you've heard people say, I don't like that person's vibes, right? Or
Yeah.
things like that. So, because people can pick up your vibration even before they pick up you physiologically, they pick up your
Yeah.
vibration. And so, as we're vibrating, the universe, think of the universe as whole, perfect, and complete. There are no vacuums, no empty spaces in the universe. So as we vibrate a certain vibrational valence or vibrate a certain way, the universe is a matching phenomenon. It has to match up to what my vibration is to form a whole, perfect, and complete. So if I am, if you had an index card, for instance, a whole index card, and you drew a line, a squiggly line down the card, and it forms a shape, well, the other side of the squiggly line has to match up in order for it to be a whole index card.
Yeah.
Does it make
I'm,
sense?
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it real quick. Yeah.
Okay, do it real quick. So take a card or something and draw a squiggly line down it. Okay, I'll move it over a little bit to the center. Okay, like that. Yeah, so the left side of the squiggly line, let's say that's you. The right side of the squiggly line is someone else or life. So whatever it is on the left, then the universe supplies what's on the right to match up, right? So in
Right
order to
then
be
to bring
whole,
it
perfect,
whole.
and complete.
Yeah.
So if you think about the universe as whole, perfect, and complete, whatever vibration you're being, the universe matches up to that. You would attract what matches up to that. It has to be, because the universe has to be whole, perfect, and complete. So therefore, the name of the game is, what is the vibration I'm being? So one needs to get in charge of their own vibration. In other words, one needs to get in charge of their own speaking, because speaking is vibrational. And thus, tracking it back to get in charge of your own speaking, get in charge of your own listening, get in charge of your context, where you're coming from. Because where you're coming from, as the ancient Chinese used to say, where you're coming from is where you're going.
The key to manifesting is getting in charge of and managing my vibration, and what is it that I'm a match to, or what is it that I would like to be a match to, and becoming the match.
Yes. If you want to start from reverse, what is it that I want? And look at what do I need to be and who do I need to be to match up to that? And where do I need to come from? And what is the listening I need to be that matches up to that? What is the come from or the context that I need to be to match up to that? The problem with most people is that they want something, but they don't want to change. They don't want to change themselves. They don't want to alter their own come from and where they're operating from because it's comfortable. I'm used to that. That is who I am. And I'm just going to be that. But I want something that doesn't match up to that. So
Yeah.
I want to be who I am, but I want something that doesn't match up to that. So if you want something outside of what you got, then you need to shift to who you need to be that matches up to that. It's like a lot of
Yeah.
people stay in this habit of this routine, this way of thinking, this way of emoting, this way of acting, this way of reacting, and it's comfortable for me. Let's call that point A. Let's call that A. The way I think, the way I feel, the way I emote, the way I react. Uh, let's call that A. But what I want is, let's say, Z, something that's quite different than that. Where Z might require of you a different way of thinking, different way of believing, different way of seeing the world, different way of reacting and emoting, a different way of behaving that's consistent with Z. So if you want Z, you have to show up consistent with whatever Z is. But if you're going to persist in being A, you may never get Z because it doesn't match up. So if you're going to be who you already are according to your habits and your thinking and your way of being, then you might as well be content to just get A and what matches up to
Yeah.
that. But if you really want Z, Z may call for something different out of you, and you might have to do your homework and start looking at who would I need to be, how would I need to be,
Yeah.
where would I need to come from to match up to that. That's the homework that
Awesome.
everybody has to do.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
yeah. Well, I think the thing is it doesn't life doesn't just happen by accident, just by wishing it. You
Yeah.
have something that you can do with it. That's the good news. You have something that you can affect the outcome and the impact that you're having. And that's the consciousness work that we're all doing is how can you impact the outcomes or the experiences that you want in your life? And there are technologies for you to actually do that. Transformational technologies for you to do that. And that's
Yeah.
our work that we do with people.
Yeah.
Bringing this full circle. If we could have something to do with the outcomes of our personal life, by extension, we could have something to do with what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of what world do we want to see? Who do we get to be, or who we have to be uh, for that world to come about? And if we're willing to shift ourselves and shift our consciousness, then we could
Yeah.
have the world work for everyone. But we can't get there from here, from where we are. We have to get there from what does that kind of world demand of us. And if we're open to that, and I happen to be very positive about it, I think it's possible, and I think we will. I think we're on the crest, the verge of a monumental shift in consciousness in the world. And you and I and the audience, we have something to say about that. We have something to do with that. And we can.
Absolutely. The 2%. Yep.
The 2%.
Dr. Ray, what is something that you can leave our listeners and viewers with?
Something that everyone can do. First of all, notice. Notice you're listening. Notice where you're coming from. Notice what's behind reactions and actions and thoughts. If you could just simply do the practice of noticing without judgment and notice without making yourself wrong, notice without any kind of assessment, but just be presently aware. That will allow you to open up a huge level of consciousness over time and allow you to be fully present. And if you can be fully present, then you can start to shape the future that you're up to from conscious awareness rather than wishing and hoping from an unconscious place. The second thing I would leave people with is that, remember I said, once you get down to your core beliefs or narrative, the genesis, and you want to write a new story, you got to cross over that bridge and of consciousness, of realizing that I am loved in spite of all that I've done, in spite of all that I've been. I am loved. I am still loved. To go to that place and from that place begin to own that and start designing your life as if that's true. And enroll yourself in that, because we've enrolled ourselves into something other than that. So enroll yourself in that. And to enroll yourself in it, it's real simple. Say it to yourself and act as if it's so. Speak with other people as if it's so, and come from there as if it's so, until critical mass happens, and so it is. And the motto I say to myself, the mantra I say to myself every day, ongoingly, and you can say it 1,000 times a day. It's almost like that Ho'oponopono prayer, but it's a healing and protective prayer. It's that the light of the divine surrounds me. The love of the divine enfolds me. The power of the divine protects me. The presence of the divine watches over me. Wherever I am, the divine is. If you could go through those on an ongoing basis, it begins to shift your vibration. And it also begins to shift your hope and your faith and your believing. And that empowers a vibration for life to match up to that. So I'll say it again.
Awesome.
The light of the divine surrounds me. The love of the divine enfolds me. The power of the divine protects me. The presence of the divine watches over me. Wherever I am, the divine is. And some people might want to change divine to God, but that's okay. Or whatever faith what you believe in. But for now, we'll call it the divine love. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr.
I look forward to doing more of these with you, having conversations.
Anytime.
Yes, absolutely.
And then lastly, where can the audience find you?
Keep it simple, rayblanchard.com.
Beautiful. Dr. Ray, thank you so much for this deeply moving and profound conversation today. Thank you to the audience, and we will see you on the next episode of the 2% Podcast.
Thank you, and to all the audience, blessings.